Thank you very much, Professor Elmer. Good evening and welcome to this seminar. I am really delighted to be here with you. I am amongst friends and colleagues that I have known for many, many years, and I'm delighted to be back in South Africa to actually meet with them and renew our acquaintances and our connections. It's a pleasure always to talk to people that are interested in management of technology, which is a field that I feel very close to, even though I have worked in other fields. But since the inception or the start of the management of technology movement, I've been associated with it in one form or another. And I would like to share with you my journey in this field to a great extent. So for those who are aware of it or not aware of it, at least know where I come from and where the issues that I thought were very important for us to deal with all over the world, actually, came from. So without any delay, I'm talking about my personal journey associated with this and how important I feel it is for the future. Because technology and society have always been intertwined, always impacted the human development. Nothing has been more important for human development than technology. And we have seen this in various ways. Yet, it's simple to talk about technology, but we had real issue in even defining it at the beginning. And at one point in time, Professor Rias van Wyk, who is from South Africa, and myself, sat together and started discussing how can we make technology be made simple for people to understand. And we decided that we're going to define it in a simple way, as the way we do things. Because most people thought of technology as machines, or as computers, or something sophisticated, mostly hardware. But technology is much more than hardware. It's actually software, it's brainware, it's a know-how, it's coded, it's tacit, and has so many forms associated with it. So we decided that it's the means by which we accomplish any of our objectives. And that was a simple thing at the beginning, but we struggled with it for a few years. The evolution of technology has always been associated with the evolution of humankind. Actually, we define the ages of progress of humanity by technology. So we have moved from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, to the Iron Age, to the Steam Age, and came the electricity age, even though I see that we still have a problem with electricity. So I hope we can solve that one. The nuclear age, the electronics age, and then the third industrial revolution, which is the information age. And now we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, but we are not stopping. So now we are moving into the X revolution, which I call World X.0. Technology actually has always been associated with the building of empires and civilizations. Actually, the ancient Egyptian civilization was based on technology, because the ancient Egyptians knew how to do agriculture. They knew how to do transportation. They knew how to build things. Actually, building of the pyramids, people until now, they still don't understand how they did it. They were associated also with the power, with the war machines, and with the equipment associated with it. And it was that technology that created the empire. But that empire moved later on to the Greeks, to the Romans, to the Europeans in the Industrial Revolution time and after the Age of Enlightenment, and later on to the USA, where actually the wealth and power is being created. We decided that we're going to think of management of technology at two levels. One level is the macro level, which are the policies to deal with the technological development and the national innovation systems and their impact on societies. And the other one is at the micro view, which is the industrial level, where it's extremely important to deal with managing, planning, development, and implementation of technological capabilities in a timely manner. And I emphasize the issue in a timely manner because those who are not going to keep up with the technology are no longer going to be there. And we have seen many, many examples of this. We have seen Kodak disappear, we have seen Nokia decline, we have seen many other companies, major companies, that declined because they did not keep up with the progress that's there. The management of technology field is interdisciplinary in nature. And that's part of the interesting part of it, because it has basis in science, natural sciences, engineering, business knowledge, many theories associated with it, the social sciences particularly, and economics, and certainly the industrial practices for innovation and for R&D development and the like. So the impact always on the creation of wealth, because the management of technology can lead to a sustainable growth, both economically and environmentally. And that's what we have to keep in mind, because some people always give technology a bad name because they look at the bad aspects of technology, because technology always have two sides. They have one side which is very bright, the other side could be destructive, like what we see in wars and the like. We agreed also at one time that management of technology, information and knowledge, and the key areas that we have to focus on straddle both the science and engineering on one side and the business knowledge on the other side. And that's what creates the MOT, because it actually looks into the issues that both of them neglect, particularly the issues of R&D development, of national technology policies, of entrepreneurship, and the like. Now, how did that move, and where did that come from? We have seen that particularly as we grew in schools and universities, after World War II, our generation at least, it was a period of stability to a great extent, because the Western industrial establishment was a winner at the war. They were dominating all aspects of life to a great extent. And whatever they produced, they actually were able to market globally elsewhere. So a great shock occurred to those industrial powers. I'm talking about the General Motors, the Fords, the big car companies, the Westinghouses, the General Electrics, and so on. And that's in the US, because that's where we actually were studying the issues. But similar issues were in Great Britain and in France and in Western Germany. The oil crisis of the 70s created a major shock, because all of a sudden the energy supply was cut, and people were not actually prepared for it. So it was a tumultuous decade which led some of the major companies, such as Chrysler, to almost declare bankruptcy. And the US Congress didn't know what to do with it because they have never faced such a situation and they never had the issue of industrial policy, but they decided that they have to bail Chrysler out. And that was the first time actually the government get involved with the private sector to bail them out because of a loss of competitive advantage. So the golden age of the American car started to disappear, and the emergence of some powers, such as the re-emergence of Japan and the re-emergence of Germany, created a new competitive environment that was not known before. Some people started paying attention, and some people at Harvard started thinking that it is a management problem, because Hayes and Abernathy actually wrote a paper in the 70s that said the problem is that the industry cannot cope with the rapid and unpredictable change and the scarce energy resources and the global competition for markets. So they blamed management for that failure that started to happen. So the answer was, okay, let's change management, bring new management. So they changed the management of big companies and big organizations. Chrysler brought in Lee Iacocca, who was actually a good change manager, and he implemented things particularly related to innovation and related to automation, at least to save the company from failure. And he was successful to a certain extent. But that wasn't enough, because the competitiveness of the American enterprise system started losing its edge, and started losing its edge to a bunch of other countries, particularly what was known as the Tigers of Asia, and later on to China and to India. So when something like this happens, it creates a big shock in the US. And the big shock always occurs in Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. usually takes the lead through the think tank organizations that they have in order to see how to bring the competitiveness of America back. Because they were quite surprised. They went first to the moon, and they had NASA. They had excellent technological schools like MIT and Carnegie Mellon and so on. They had excellent business schools such as Wharton and Stanford and many of the other ones. How come we are losing competitive advantage all the time in here? So certain groups of people from industry combined with academia from MIT and from other areas, and particularly industry was led by IBM and by Boeing and the others, decided that it's about time that we focus on where the problems are. And they met at the National Academy of Engineers in Washington, D.C., in a big workshop. Obviously, it was prepared for almost 2 years ahead of time. And they issued a small booklet called Management of Technology, the Hidden Competitive Advantage. So they recognized that the issue is not having good science schools and good science, because science does not contribute to wealth. Science actually contributes to the understanding of nature. It doesn't talk about economic returns. Technology in itself, even though it existed in several places, such as in the military and in the space, was not reaching the commercial end and was not bringing return. The schools were not focusing on the right issues. So there was a big movement in there that what we need actually is that combination whereby we take technology and bring it out to the marketplace for wealth creation and for economic growth. And that required different types of education, different type of approach, different type of mentality, even in the business schools and in the engineering schools. And from there on, what I usually put, we had a series of workshops that were held periodically, almost every 2 years, sponsored by the National Science Foundation, with involvement from the National Academy of Engineers and the National Institute of Science, and with industry, in order to establish what constitutes the foundation for this new and emerging field, which is called management of technology. So those 4 publications here, I consider them basic in understanding the foundation for management of technology from my point of view as we progressed. The first one in here was the foundation of IMOT, because we started 35 years ago. Actually, we started working on things before that in the 80s, early 80s to the mid 80s, but the first conference of IMOT was held in February 1988. And it was attended actually by Dr. DeWitt from here, who was actually the first chair in management of technology or something. So we had always representation from South Africa into those discussions. What was happening? Trends were changing immediately. So life cycles became shorter. Innovation became continuous. Competition was unexpected and unpredicted in the future. The markets became global and uncertain. The quality was imperative all of a sudden. Production was customized as opposed to mass production of the second industrial revolution. Organizations was flat and agile. So those changes had to be brought in. And actually, when President Clinton came in the 90s, he established the technology policy arm of his government, which led many of the changes in the 90s that led to, again, re-emergence of the US competitive environment. Now, from 1990 to 2020, the issues became that the scale of change and the speed of change were very fast because of the emergence of the information technology issues. The world became much more competitive and global with the emergence of the Asian tigers and particularly with China. China was just starting to emerge in the 90s. Creation of blocks. It was first the World Trade Organization.
Please note that level 4 is now closed. Thank you.
It was first the World Trade Organization, which is now irrelevant, and now became the competition between the US and China. I actually plotted that curve in the 1990s, predicting the growth of technology and the speed of technological change that would happen in the next few decades. And indeed, if you follow the stock markets of the US, you find that the technology companies are expanding and growing with great strength and great wealth creation potential. Actually, if you look at Europe, the per capita income of people in Europe have also followed the various industrial revolutions and particularly grew with the information technology revolutions around 1980. And what was happening in here is indeed a revolution that came in with the advent of computers, particularly personal computers. And if you recall Moore's law, and Moore is Gordon Moore, who is the founder of Intel, that predicted that the number of transistors per integrated circuit would double every 18 months, and that the price would halve. So all of a sudden you have the technology going up and the prices are going down. So now we are moving into a real technological society in the world. And it continued to happen. So when we were talking about bits and bytes and kilobytes, now we are talking about terabytes and petabytes and exabytes and zettabytes and yottabytes. The world is different. The world has changed. In a day, we have more than 500 million tweets, 294 billion emails, 4 petabytes of data are created, 4 terabytes of data from each connected car, 65 billion messages are sent to WhatsApp, 5 billion searches. Huge change in the way we do things. And then COVID hit. And COVID brought with it even stronger run at technology, because the healthcare had to actually respond. The information connections needed to be improved. The new technologies needed to be developed in a very short period of time. And all of that required technology and required connections. The issue of competitiveness also became another question, because competitiveness has always been in the minds of people since the 80s. The whole term competitiveness was created and appeared first in the US Congress in the 80s. The World Economic Forum defined it as a set of institutional policies and factors that determine the level of productivity of a country. We have defined it before in the Council of Competitiveness in the USA as the degree to which a nation can, under free and fair market conditions, produce goods and services that will meet the test of international markets. When we plotted how we can reach that level, at least from my point of view, the way I viewed it is that we need to invest in infrastructure, in productive facilities, R&D, technology, education, and so on. Then we move further to improving the efficiency and the quality. Then we go to global trade because the market was becoming global. And then we can reach a high standard of living for the population. That changed after COVID because the issue has changed. Now it's the public policy, the resilient healthcare, the resilient ICT infrastructure, investment in productive facilities, economic clusters, green manufacturing, logistics and supply chain, trade, then you reach high standard of living. So the whole concept of resiliency particularly, which essentially means self-sufficiency and sustainability, became a critical issue in terms of how to achieve a competitive environment in a country. Still, the challenge to unleash innovation is there and to expand market globe. And it's always dependent on public policy, how we deal with education, how we deal with economic system and the stability of the financial system, how to develop R&D and new innovative products, and then still the trade system, but the trade system now is interrupted. The supply chain now is not as smooth as it used to be, particularly with the trade wars. So we are moving backward from globalization to more protectionism, and the World Trade Organization is losing its effectiveness. So the innovation issue is a complex issue. It's nonlinear, it's interactive, it has lots of aspects associated with it. But with it came also new norms in terms of work habits. People now, after the pandemic, work from home more than from the office. My son, his total work is from home, and he's connected with his colleagues all over, and he's doing his business. The other one is working on logistics, and he's having tremendous problems associated with global supply chain operation. The ushering of the shared economy, which became very strong, again, the Uber, the Airbnb, the fintechs, and the like, all of them are becoming very important and critical in the new economy that we deal with. Smart cities, everybody is talking about smart cities. Egypt is building a new capital, which is costing a lot of money, but it's a smart city. But to create a smart city, you have to also spend a lot of money. So I don't know. And now, artificial intelligence. The gig economy is expanding tremendously. And there's 75% of people probably are going to be freelancers in here. So there are drivers that are shaping the world. There are things that are game changers, and we have seen them. If you have seen the students and the young people right now, they are continuously on some sort of Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and they never can get their eyes to look at you somehow, or to talk to you. If you can get them to talk to you, you'll be lucky. Now, there are also autonomous vehicles and drones, which are becoming extremely critical today. And we have seen the role of drones, actually, in the Ukraine war recently. Other issues that emerged, obviously, the cybersecurity, which is becoming a major one, the blockchain, the biotechnologies, and the bitcoins. And the growth of the bitcoins is problematic, because no one thinks that it has a sustainable value. Many people think it's a pyramid scheme of some sort, but still people are running to the Bitcoin. That led countries to also spend a lot of money on innovation. So when you look at the USA spending about $700 billion on innovation, China is becoming very close second. And China, actually, when you look at the real value of the amount of dollars spent, probably outperforms the US. And then comes Japan and Germany and the others. Many countries upped their percentage of R&D in their GDP. Israel is number one, with Korea and Sweden and Belgium and USA to follow. The interesting thing, obviously, when you look at the world patent numbers, China has moved ahead by far, 45% of new patents in the world. And with the companies also, the Chinese companies, the Huawei's and the Oppo and so on, outperforming everybody else. And that's where you see the real fight these days. The real war is the war for innovation, the war for technology. And that's what's happening today. The United States still ahead in the GDP, with about $23 trillion. China has become a close second. Actually, when you look at the PPP, which is a very important factor, you find that China is number one. And China is going to keep moving ahead in this. That's why the US is very nervous these days from China. I've plotted the world. This is the map of the world as we know it, but I've plotted it in the 90s. I plotted it this way. With the US, that's to the scale of the GDP. The US is the blue, Japan was the red, and you can see South America, and you can see Africa. That's the size compared to the GDP produced. The world has become more distorted these days. So in 20 years, the distortion is even more. But China has grew, the US has grew. Look at Africa, where we are. We're having a problem in here. Companies also changed. Walmart's still ahead, and it's producing more than the national economy of Argentina in terms of revenues. Sinopec, more than Norway, the national economy of Norway. Apple has a better rank than Vietnam or Romania or the Czech Republic. So the big technology companies, and by the way, Walmart, people think of it as a retail company. It's not. It's a technology company, actually. So, where's the world going? That's the world X.0. That's the future. We are progressing. Well, human evolution, we're moving into brain, and we're moving into space, and we don't know where. What does that mean? If we look at the hype cycle for the emerging technologies that Gartner produces periodically, you find a bunch of emerging technologies in here. Technologies of the future essentially very much dependent on AI. So the world X.0 has an AI in it. The generative AI and the augmented reality AR applications are huge. And let me just show you something in here for engineers that I found. Look at this. You don't need to visualize anymore. Your telephone is going to visualize the things for you. There are 4 emerging technologies that are disrupting the world in the next maybe 8 to 10 years. Neuromorphic computing, generative AI. Number 2, self-supervised learning, the future experience of predictive or pretext machine learning. I'm going to show you something interesting. We are not going to have control anymore. And that's very dangerous, by the way. Metaverse is big. The development linked to virtual reality technology. It's going to affect everything. It's going to affect education. It's going to affect the way we visualize things and so on. and human-centered AI. There are things in human-centered AI that are extremely important. The digital human, which we're seeing. Now, when you get a video on your social media somehow, you will never know if it's a true video or not. And you'll never know that the speaker is the same or not. And you'll hear the same voice and see the same person, but that's not the case somewhere. But there's also the digital twins, which are very useful, and very useful particularly in maintenance operation and in smart cities and things of that nature. And they would be developed and running very well. The trust, risk, and security management. That's a big issue. How can you trust what you're getting? How can you trust what you see? Is what you see is true? So the fact that you are seeing something may not reflect the reality. What's the risk associated with it? What are the security issues associated with it? And how can we manage all of those? That's a real management of technology issue. Digital immune systems. How can you actually immune your digital systems? You will have hackers all over the world. And they can get to anything that they want to get to. And are we going to be able to deal with that timely? And timely is important, because if we are late, who knows what the consequences are. 6G is coming. People are working on the 6G. And 6G is going to lead to a very strong Web 3.0, where everything is connected and blockchain technology maybe keeping some security, but again, it's going to give us opportunities, plenty of opportunities for the future. So, challenge is yours. How can you manage all these technological resources? This is the challenge of management of technology. It's not the technology itself. It's not the business. It's how you can manage it. Thank you very much.